All right, so welcome everyone. Here we are on video 2. We're going into the second chakra, which is Swadhisthana. Here with David to delve into the details of the aspects and qualities of this particular chakra, the second chakra. So David, how would you begin to describe the second chakra?
Right. Kind of as we move up the chakras, it gets a little easier to describe because we can differentiate. It's like when you can make comparisons. In the first chakra, we're talking about the solidification and the gravity element. The second chakra, the force, is known as covalence in science. And it's similar in that it's bringing together, sticking things together, condensing in a sense, which was the gravitational forces condensing the waves into the atoms and molecules. Here we have a force that is then gathering the molecules and combining them, or gathering the atoms and combining them into molecules. Now, most of the material world we see out here, including our bodies, it's all made of molecules. These are really the building blocks, but the molecules themselves are made of smaller building blocks called atoms. Now, if we go into quantum physics, subatomic particles, they're finding more and more subatomic little particles, which all boil down to being actually wave functions of electromagnetic waves. So we're into the second phase of materialization, manifestation, creation. And then if we get into the geometry of it, from the mathematics of the universe, which runs on geometry, actually, mathematics and geometry, and in the scientific community will totally agree with how mathematical everything is. Here we're going into the geometry, and I mentioned the first chakra crossing at 90 degrees, you get this entanglement. Now, when these waves are crossing at 60 degrees instead of 90, you get a kind of an attachment, but it's not an entanglement. It's more temporary. It's flexible. Again, these are kind of qualities of the water element. And in the elements, we're going from the earth element in the first chakra now to the water element. Now, water is still a material substance, but it's not solid like the rocks and the things in our material world. More flexible. In fact, doesn't have a specific shape. I mean, the water molecule has a shape, which we can look at in the snowflake pattern. And we didn't mention too much about the petals, actually. The first chakra has 4 petals, which is going out into the 4 directions of the material world. Now, the second chakra has 6 petals, and they're going into a different level, different realm of our human reality, and that is the social realm. Before we get into the social and psychological aspects, let me go back in a kind of a sequence or a pattern, orderly pattern, as we did with Muladhara, looking at what this energy does physiologically. It's being the water element. It's more in charge of what's happening to the fluids in our system, of which we know we have the fluid of blood. We know that we have lymphatic fluid. We know we have, not everybody knows, we have cerebrospinal fluid. These are 3 main fluids that have their jobs of distributing nutrition, helping to eliminate toxins, cleaning out the body. This is all part of our fluid system. And I think most people know also we're 80% water. So water is a main component of our blood. Water is a main component of lymphatic, main component of cerebrospinal fluid. It's simply the water molecules. Now add different things to it, it becomes blood. You throw in some red blood cells, it becomes blood. Other components, and it becomes lymphatic fluid, all based on water. So this water element is then governed by the energy of Swadhisthana. When this energy is flowing, our fluid system is fluid. It keeps flowing. And one of the main jobs, again, is like we use water to wash our hands in the outside world. Well, inside, this is the liquid that's going in and around between all the cells. But we don't have blood vessels going to every cell, 50 trillion cells. We don't have 50 trillion blood vessels supplying each cell. But the nutrients and the oxygen gets into the lymphatic system around the cell, and then it's like the ferryman that's going between the blood and the cells. And then the detoxification from cell metabolism goes back into this fluid element, back into the lymphatic system. Lymphatic system moves on back up all the way into the central chest. It has its own circulation, and then it comes into back after going through the lymph nodes where it's scanned and purified and scanned for any content, including virus content or bacteria or whatever. And then appropriate actions and interactions are taken with other body systems. If there's a virus, it will send a signal to produce an antibody for that particular virus, etc. All part of the internal body chemistry. And chemistry, chemistry is a main function, because every molecule in our system is chemistry. It's made of chemicals. It's the combination of these atoms into neuropeptides, proteins, etc., etc.
So there's a lot of combining, a lot of mixing, a lot of coming together. The covalence thing that you mentioned, right? So a lot of combinations and a lot of
combinations and recombinations. In that regards, one of the glands connected, or one of the organs connected, is the liver. And the liver has thousands of functions. Okay, it does a lot of the recombining of the elements that are in our system. It detoxifies us by taking anything, alcohol molecule, and taking it apart, and then using the atoms to recombine into healthier chemistry that we need in a protein or in a blood sugar or something. The recombining ability is one of the main functions of Swadhisthana.
So those are, the chemical combinations and that physical factor. Swadhisthana is also associated with being the social connection. Also just the flow of what's happening in our lives as well, not just the physical level, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So
these connections, if you study how water flows and how you can go with the flow of water, and then socially we have that similar characteristic. The energy allows us to be part of a group and just go with the flow of what people would like to do. So, and then going with the flow, going into the motion, the dancing flow, and all these things.
Right. Social connection and social flow, the flow of social connection, and how easily you navigate that, or how easily you go with it, right?
Yeah. And out of that, you get the whole society. That's all social connections. And when those connections are good, the society kind of grows and everybody's helping each other out, which is really how our body works on the inside. The cells are all communicating, helping each other out, and working with a specific task that the body needs, so that the body can function as a whole. And every gland, organ, and cell has its little job to do. The same thing applies on the external world to people in our civilization, where we've got a mechanic and an engineer and an architect and
and all these people
functions.
And all these people coming together in that same covalent sort of concept, right? Coming together and together being able to combine and recombine into production, into making things, into
Yeah.
that sort of thing, right?
And then the society functions. And same thing on the inside of us, we function.
Mm-hmm.
The second element is in the flow. And in the
Mm-hmm.
flow includes the internal chemistry. All the cells are putting out these little signals called neuropeptides, little molecules that have a certain vibration, frequency, a message. And then if
Yeah.
the fluid is going, if you're not stuck, sitting too long without motion, the fluids are circulating around and the messages get sent from this cell to that cell to this gland to that organ. The communication on the inside is happening to
Mm-hmm.
keep us healthy. And this is one of the things about the second chakra is it's being fluid, it's supposed to be flowing. And when
Mm-hmm.
we create a sedentary lifestyle where we're just sitting and moving our fingers on the keyboard all day, we're kind of disabling one of our functions. And then you
Mm-hmm.
end up with bad circulation at all
Yep.
levels, bad health
Right.
as a result of that. So
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the things.
Mm-hmm.
Another component I didn't mention is in the glands connected. Now, the fluid
Mm-hmm.
system, the
Yeah.
watery part of us, we got our kidneys that are filtering the fluids, taking out excess water, etc. We've got the bladder, the whole lymphatic system, which is another system like the blood vessel system, but it doesn't have a pump. So it requires motion to move us, to circulate itself. And then we have
Mm-hmm.
on top of the kidneys, we have these endocrine glands, the adrenals.
The adrenal
Most people
glands.
know about the adrenal glands, produce adrenaline and a few other cool substances that are then regulating what's happening in our body. And we all know adrenaline gives you the power to boost, to jump, and to do things. If you don't
Mm-hmm.
have that, if you don't have that enough adrenaline to do, you'll find yourself in a daydream of, oh, I'd like to do this, but you don't
Mm-hmm.
have the power to do it. That's a lack of adrenaline.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's where you don't want to show up for the party, right? That's where you don't want to leave the house. I don't want to go and I don't want to go connect with all these other
Yeah,
people
your
because
whole
I don't,
social instinct kind of drops down.
right. Yeah.
Mhm.
And so I started my day with a, a sacral sort of yoga, which was moving the hips and moving those lower organs and Kapalabhati, lower breathing down there to stimulate the organs.
Yeah,
And
good.
so,
That's,
yeah, that motion's important, right?
yeah, and you can feel it when you do it. It just brings up your vitality and
Hmm.
everything's working well again.
So the second chakra is related to fluid and water connection, um, procreation. So procreation and sexuality are two little things that sometimes get confused in this in the second chakra. Can you speak to those ideas? Because procreation is part of that covalence and combining that we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Um,
So you
so
have actually the seed, the sperm
mhm,
and the egg are running on the energy of the first chakra, but they
mhm,
can't combine without the second chakra. Okay, so you have this same force that is pulling atoms together into molecules. You got this power that's attracting people to each other. And when the attraction is strong enough, it creates a relationship. The relationship moves into sensuality, sexuality, and then procreation.
procreation.
Yeah.
Hmm.
There's another force, which comes from the fourth chakra, that generates the will, the desire to sensually to feel, to reproduce. So there's, like I was saying last time in the first chakra, you can't completely separate all these
Hmm.
chakras. They're flowing together, just like the atoms are combining into molecules. Everything works in combination and cooperation.
Hmm. Yeah. So what I like what you just said about the, you know, the building blocks coming from Muladhara. Muladhara is the first chakra, and those are the building blocks. But the second chakra is where, you know,
We
a
make the
certain,
biological building blocks at the
yeah,
molecular level.
at the next level of combining this stuff. So as we go along, we'll also talk about where that, because there's also confusion with the second chakra, where that's where the decisions get made on how you're going to combine and how you're going to do all these things. But it in fact involves a lot of the other chakras in terms of what direction you're going to go in and all of that.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
getting back to the second chakra, yeah, it's the that combining and recombining that makes everything flow, that makes life
yeah.
very important.
You just mentioned decision making. Decision making ideally comes from frontal cortex. You're up in the sixth chakra. You're making solid decisions. What happens in the second chakra is you've got everyone else's influence, and going with
Right.
the flow can be a little overwhelming. You can't
Right.
decide what you want to do because, well, they want me to do this and he wants me to do that. And what should I do? So there's an element of confusion that comes at this social level, sometimes
On its own.
inhibiting. Yeah, on its
That's
own. So
right. That's
sometimes
right.
this is inhibiting
Mhm.
our actual desire or will to make the decision and stick to it because we're influenced.
Mhm. I think it's where there's a little bit of confusion on the sensuality and sexuality of the second chakra isn't on its own. It's not just the second chakra. There's a lot more going on, which we will
Yeah,
touch on as we go along. But
yeah.
so the best breathing techniques, we were doing some this morning where we were moving, you know, the diaphragm and
Yeah.
oxygenating the organs. What would you recommend there?
Well, exactly what you were doing. The abdominal breathing is moving this whole area. And
Hmm.
abdominal breathing is bringing the prana to first and second chakras. When you get to the upper chest breathing, the prana is moving more upward, but to empower the lower part, it's the abdominal breathing. And it's also moving the whole abdominal, all the interior organs that are in there, all the fluids are being moved by the action of the breath itself.
Hmm.
Interior movement, which is important. And I said, in the sedentary lifestyle, we're sitting hardly moving at all for long periods of time. The whole body kind of stagnates.
Hmm.
And we start to feel a bit stressed, a little bit of anxiety. And that's based on the physical aspect, physiological reality. There's not enough oxygen getting to all the cells in our body, and they're going into stress because they are suffocating. And they put out little signals in other chemicals,
Hmm.
neuropeptides, that give us that message. Hey, well, I'm feeling really stressed. And then you hear it even in Hollywood movies. Hey, take a deep breath.
Yeah,
That's a
it's
old time solution. Yeah, just to
well,
reoxygenate.
yeah, and it's funny because we have these statements that become a general statement that everybody makes, but you sort of lose touch with where the statement came from, right? Take a deep breath.
Yeah,
Everybody says it. I mean, anybody will say it in any situation. It's not a strange thing to say. It's actually normal.
yeah,
Um, but that's where it comes from, what we're talking about right now and what we're explaining, the function, the mechanical function of taking a deep breath. What does it do, you know?
yeah,
And yeah, so
yeah.
important.
So going back to your book, I breathe, therefore I am. The fact is, we can be breathing much more deeply all the time, or much of the time, instead of just
Hmm.
doing a little bit of deep breathing periodically under dire circumstances when we're stressed out.
Hmm.
If we're breathing more deeply most of the time, your cells are getting what they need most of the time. Your health
Hmm.
maintains peak performance.
Yeah. So is there any other aspect of Swadhisthana that you'd like to speak to as we wrap up number 2?
What I mentioned The first chakra has 4 petals. The petals of the chakras have significance and a meaning
Right.
that people don't think of too much, but there's a reason the first one has 4 petals, and that's really connected to the earth element, the 4 directions of our material world. And that's a whole study in itself. What
Right.
are these directions? Each direction is one of the other chakras. And again, a complicated study as you get into it, not for this brief interview. Now we come to the second chakra. There's 6 petals. And you can see this in the water element itself, which always, you freeze water, it forms into 6 petaled combinations, snowflakes. That's
Right.
a common pattern. It's indicating the molecular structure of water has this kind of geometry that
Right.
fits into these, like pieces of a puzzle fitting in to make these flowery 6-petaled formations.
Into the
Millions of
hexagram. Right. Six.
Yeah.
The 6. Yeah. It's there, right there. The evidence is right there, and in nature and in molecular combinations.
Yeah. And then I mentioned the angles of intersection create these patterns. Now, the other aspect, important aspect at the psychological level, the 6 petals represent 6 different types of relationships, which we have through life. I'll edit that out. But the 6 kind of relationships. Okay, you're born, you're a child, a baby, total dependent. You've got a mother and a father. They're the ones taking care of you. Then you have brothers and sisters who come along, a different relationship that you have with your father, with your mother, with your siblings. And then later on in life, you're discovering other people in a similar mode of brothers and sisters. We have an extension to friends and people around. Later on, you go into a relationship, and then you become the mother and the father. So you're in a completely different angle from where you began as the baby, the infant, totally vulnerable, totally absorbing everything. Now you are the influencer that is educating the child, taking care of. We go through these different roles in our evolution, and recognizing the roles and realizing we can shift. When you're talking to your father, you have a certain vocabulary, you say certain things. And then when you're talking to your lover, a different vocabulary. You're not talking about the same things anymore. So we play these different roles. And this is part of the second chakra, personality. We have different personalities, different roles we play in society. When you're talking to different people, you have to speak the language they speak, which you and I have 3 languages plus other vocabulary, let's say, and then you shift to what's appropriate. And then your personality and what you say changes according to whether you're speaking to a close friend or you're talking to an immigration official at the border. You're a different role. So being mindful of these roles
there.
Yeah. So these roles are important to be mindful of. The consciousness that's in the middle, deciding which role you play, not getting confused. And that's another aspect of the second chakra. There can be confusion. Social confusion enters in there, and you need to stand your ground, which goes back to the first chakra. Who am I in all these relationships?
Standing solid on your 2 feet.
Yeah.
That's right. Back to your foundation. And
yeah,
very good. Well, I think that we covered a lot of cool angles on Swadhisthana, the second chakra. So we continue in the next video with Manipura.
Yeah.
Into the third.
Okay. As I said, maybe we'll do one in the interim. Once we get to 3 chakras, we can talk about the relationship of those chakras, how those forces are creating our material world.
Yeah, because Anahata, the heart chakra, is the center. There's 3 chakras above and 3 below that form part of the chakra system that we're talking about here.
Hmm.
So yeah, talking about the first three and how they work together and what they're responsible for. That would be great.
Yeah.
Continue on. Until
Okay.
next time, everyone.
Just a little brief, a little chart at the back here was Muladhara, Swadhisthana, Manipura, Anahata, Vishuddha, and Ajna. And then we have the seventh, eighth, and ninth, which are really out in space. We're going to go as far as the seventh. Maybe we'll cover the others. But again, this is one view of them going up the spine. In another Mayan tradition, they have them laid out in the four directions, which is one of the reasons I mentioned four directions of the first four petals of the first chakra going in the four directions. Different perspectives on the chakras. And the Mayan is much more mental, psychological. In the Hindu version, it's anatomically, physiologically connected to everything. And then the Western perspective of ancient traditions went into the psychological aspect of where does your consciousness go in this mind map. It's all an amazing study. Yeah.
Well, that's the beauty of doing this exploration that we're doing, right? The chakra system is a framework that we can understand and look at and use as that map that you just mentioned, right?
Yeah, it gives us like a schematic in electronics or a map of where everything fits into place, from the physiological connections to your thoughts, your emotions. All really cool stuff. And what everybody should really know about being human, since most of us who are listening to this probably are humans. We hope. The aliens.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. All right. So we'll move into the third chakra on the next video. And great. We'll see you next time.
See you next time. Namaste.